Hello everyone, and today we're looking at one of the strangest military vehicles ever built, a machine so unusual that even today most people can hardly believe it actually existed. This is the Tempo G1200, a German off-road vehicle introduced in 1936 by the company Vidal Sohn Tempo-Werk. And honestly, if somebody told you this vehicle was designed by a group of engineers who were trying to win a bet after spending an entire night studying military trucks, you might actually believe it. Because almost everything about the Tempo G1200 was different from conventional vehicle design. It had two engines, two gearboxes, four-wheel drive, four-wheel steering, and a drivetrain layout so bizarre that very few manufacturers ever attempted anything similar again. Even today, among collectors and military vehicle enthusiasts, the G1200 is considered one of the most fascinating engineering experiments of the pre-war period. At first glance, the Tempo G1200 doesn't look particularly revolutionary. The body resembles a small military utility car with simple open-top coachwork, minimal body panels, and almost symmetrical front and rear styling. But that unusual appearance actually hides one of the most innovative drivetrains ever installed in a production off-road vehicle. Instead of using a single engine and a complicated transfer case to drive all four wheels, Tempo engineers came up with a completely different solution. They installed one engine in the front and another engine in the rear. Each engine had its own gearbox and independently powered one axle. The front engine drove the front wheels, while the rear engine drove the rear wheels. Together they created a permanent four-wheel drive system without requiring a central differential. And honestly, even by modern standards, that sounds completely crazy. Yet somehow it worked remarkably well. The power plants themselves were relatively small. The G1200 used two water-cooled two-cylinder, two-stroke ILO engines. Each engine displaced approximately 598 cubic centimeters, producing around 19 horsepower at 3,500 revolutions per minute. Combined output reached approximately 38 horsepower, which may not sound impressive today. But remember, this vehicle weighed only about 2,300 to 3,200 pounds, depending on body configuration. Each engine had its own four-speed transmission, and one of the most interesting features was the ability to operate either engine independently. On roads or during light-duty driving, the driver could run only one engine to save fuel. When difficult terrain appeared, the second engine could be engaged, instantly transforming the vehicle into a fully powered four-wheel drive machine. Decades later, Citroën would use a surprisingly similar idea on the famous 2CV Sahara, but Tempo was already experimenting with the concept during the 1930s. And honestly, the innovations didn't stop there. The G1200 also featured four-wheel steering, something extremely rare for military vehicles of the era. All four wheels could turn, dramatically reducing the turning circle and allowing the vehicle to navigate tight forest trails, mountain roads, and rough terrain that would challenge much larger military trucks. The suspension was fully independent on all four wheels, which was another advanced feature for the mid-1930s. Combined with generous ground clearance, the vehicle could travel across terrain that would stop many conventional vehicles completely. Contemporary demonstrations showed the G1200 climbing obstacles, crossing rough ground, and navigating terrain that looked more suitable for a tracked vehicle than a small military car. It was a genuine off-road specialist long before the term SUV even existed. One of the strangest visual details was the placement of the spare wheels. Mounted along the sides of the vehicle, they weren't just carried for emergencies. These freely rotating wheels could actually help the vehicle overcome trenches, steep embankments, and other obstacles by acting almost like support rollers. It was another example of how Tempo engineers approached every problem differently from everybody else. Looking at the vehicle today, you start noticing that almost every component seems designed by someone who asked, "What if we ignore all the usual rules and start over?" And honestly, that's exactly why the G1200 remains so fascinating. It feels less like a military vehicle and more like an experimental prototype that somehow escaped into production. Although the German military evaluated the vehicle, it never became a major standard vehicle of the Wehrmacht. Part of the reason was prejudice against two-stroke engines, which many military planners considered unsuitable for large-scale military service. Ironically, several foreign nations recognized the vehicle's potential much faster. Countries including Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Romania, and others purchased the G1200 before and during the war years. In Finland especially, the vehicle developed a strong reputation because its four-wheel drive, independent suspension, and twin-engine layout performed extremely well in harsh winter conditions, where many conventional vehicles struggled. Soldiers appreciated the vehicle's ability to continue operating in environments that punished more traditional designs. Production began in 1936 and continued until 1943 to 1944, with roughly 1,200 to 1,300 vehicles built in total. That makes the G1200 relatively rare compared with most military vehicles of the Second World War. During the war, examples served as reconnaissance vehicles, patrol cars, staff transports, and utility vehicles. While they never became famous like the Kübelwagen or Jeep, they quietly demonstrated engineering solutions that were decades ahead of their time. The vehicle could reach speeds of approximately 42 miles per hour, while fuel consumption remained surprisingly reasonable considering it essentially carried two engines. With only one engine running, fuel economy improved significantly, giving commanders additional flexibility depending on mission requirements. Perhaps the most remarkable thing about the Tempo G1200 is that it proves innovation doesn't always come from the biggest manufacturers. Vidal Sohn was not a giant automotive corporation, yet they created one of the most technically unusual military vehicles of the entire pre-war era. Twin engines, twin gearboxes, four-wheel drive, four-wheel steering, independent suspension, obstacle assist wheels, and selectable engine operation, all combined into one compact package. Even today, many collectors seeing a G1200 for the first time assume it must be a post-war experimental prototype because the engineering seems too advanced and too unconventional for 1936. And honestly, that's probably the greatest compliment any engineer could receive. Today, surviving Tempo G1200 vehicles are extremely rare and highly prized by collectors and museums. Whenever one appears at a military vehicle show, it attracts crowds almost immediately. People come expecting to see another old military car and instead discover one of the strangest automotive engineering experiments ever placed into production. More than 80 years after its introduction, the G1200 still feels unique, still feels innovative, and still raises the same question it did back in 1936. Who on earth thought this was a good idea? The answer, of course, is brilliant engineers who weren't afraid to challenge conventional thinking. And if you enjoy discovering forgotten vehicles, bizarre engineering solutions, and automotive machines that seem decades ahead of their time, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because there are many more unbelievable automotive stories waiting ahead.